In today's climate, one of the main transactions that we're seeing is that of mergers, acquisitions, and divestitures. Today, we have two experts in the industry to talk about them both, as an observation as well as practitioners who lived in the worlds before. Leonard Manganza, Synity's Chief Customer Officer, and Chris Knurr, Chief Digital Officer. To you, Leonard and Chris.
Hi, my name is Leonard, and I am the Chief Customer Officer at Synity. And I've been in the data business for 18 years. But what that means in practicality terms is that I've been in the M&A and mergers, acquisition, and divestiture business for probably half of my time, working on the largest multinational deals, whether they're acquisitions, mergers, or divestitures. And what that's meant is we've gone, starting 18 years ago, from helping customers integrate two companies to now getting involved earlier in the process and evaluating whether or not there are enough synergies in the business to merge them. And on the end of the deal, making sure that the return on investment is realized.
Hi, I'm Chris Knurr, Chief Digital Officer of Synity. Very excited to talk about mergers, acquisitions, and divestitures. When I was an executive at Johnson & Johnson, I had the opportunity to participate in many deals at all life cycle stages. J&J is effectively a portfolio company and buys and sells different companies and different divisions all the time. So I had the opportunity to see firsthand, what happens when you take a data-first approach. What happens when you don't take a data-first approach? How do you make sure that the deal value is realized correctly? What kind of problems are there you can have on integration of the acquisitions? What kind of problems do you have carving out complicated assets and getting a good value for them? So, very, very interesting topic that I've had the opportunity to see firsthand from an industry perspective, and then also kind of bring into my software and consulting life. So, very important point, in anytime there's an economic crisis, there's a huge uptick in merger, acquisition, and divestiture activity. And this is something that we're seeing in the market and the environments that the analysts are seeing, and we're seeing from talking to our clients. And the reason there's this big surge of activity is, unfortunately, some companies are not doing well and are really going to be forced to shrink down and focus on their core operations and divest non-core operations and assets. Similarly, companies who are doing well are going to have the opportunity to consolidate their market position and their market power, by inorganic growth. So, we see that there's a great opportunity. This is going to be a huge wave of mergers, acquisitions, and divestitures, and companies that do all of this well are really going to reap outsized rewards and outsized benefits from that good execution.
So in the introduction, I mentioned that I'm in the data business, and that means that I'm in the merger and acquisition and divestiture business, just to show you, kind of how that works. You might sit there and say, does that make sense on the buy side, or does that make sense on the sell side? And the short answer is yes. Just using an example from this week, we had a deal maker call us and say, will you help us do a carve out of one of our public companies? They want to set up a tracer stock. So that's a divestiture of sorts, if you would. The very next day, they called back and said, as soon as they made the announcement and their plan to do that, a private equity firm called who owned a like company and said, we want to see if it makes sense for us to buy that tracer stock in its entirety. By the end of the conversation, they said, this is really a data exercise. We want you to take the data from the company that we wanted to create a tracer stock for. We want you to take the data from a like company that's in the private equity firm's portfolio, bring them into a clean room and see what the synergies are. I mean, this is before anyone's even talking about price, right? Are we in the same markets? Is one a wholesale market and one a retail market? Is one US domestic? Is one international? Is one in the buy-sell business? Is one in the manufacturing business? And see, would there be better value in combining these companies? And this is a data exercise starting right here up front in the evaluation phase.
It's of paramount importance to understand the role that the data plays in these transactions. And I'll just give you a simple example. Mostly when a company buys another company, it's a story about growth. It's a story about margin. It's a story about, now my sales bag is bigger and I'm bringing your products to my markets, and I'm taking your products to my markets. And in order to assess how well that's going to work, as Leonard was saying, the first part of that is a data exercise. Now, what we find is all too often that's kind of driven off of some theoretical framework, and really the right way to do it is to do it in a data-first, data-driven, empirical way, where you can look at what the sales synergies and what the growth synergies are up front, and then you can bring that into the acquisition integration and quickly measure the deal value and the sales growth as you're going along. But to do that correctly, all of it depends on having a good understanding of your Salesforce data, your customer data, your product data, your territory data, and so on. And getting that wrong is going to lead to a much worse result in the value realization and the time to value of the deal.
So I just gave the example of a deal maker, coming to us, just thinking again about, real examples from this week. We have a customer that's done, 4 acquisitions over the last 4 years. They still don't have the way to view their revenue, by sector. Right now it's by companies, which are very discrete, as opposed to saying, what's the common thread for a customer across, all of these channels and all of these businesses and all of these ERP systems. So this takes a little bit of data work, obviously, to create a way, in an automated way, to do harmonization of customers, right? So that you could recognize the customer in system 1 and system 2. And keep in mind, these are highly volatile transactional systems. So it changes daily. So we have to use, our AI and our ML to recognize these duplicates and harmonize them so that, the management of the company and even the board can see the harmonized revenue.
So let's talk about what we mean by a data-first and data-driven approach. All too often, because these deals are big dollar values, they're exciting, they have a lot of executive involvement, the definition of them is not specific enough to really drive the value and drive the execution. So, my preferred approach, the best practice approach, really is to look at the data at a very granular level, X-ray the data, if you will, and then derive the facts from that. What that allows you to do, whether it's on the buy side or on the sell side, is define asset values correctly, the buy price, the sell price. It allows you, when you get into the integration execution mode, to have absolute clarity on what's going to be required to do the integration, to do the value realization, the people, process, and critically the systems and technology components. And then very importantly as well, make sure that the TSA and TMA commitments are met and that penalties are avoided, and that you end up avoiding very expensive cleanup work that is not always necessary to do. I was involved in a very extensive cleanup at one point in my career that involved legal entity restructuring, because some of the upfront data work hadn't been done correctly, and it was almost like the company had to do and pay for the acquisition twice. All the while the clock is running, the meter's running on the time to value for the deal, and that degrades over time. There's some very good benchmark research that suggests that if the integration isn't done correctly in about 18 months, then it has to be redone potentially over and over and over again. And far too often, as the data experts and the people cleaning this up, we see companies spending the same dollar over and over again unnecessarily, and then also not getting a good and efficient time to value that that motivates these deals to begin with.
So I'm going to use my third real life example from this week to answer the question of what's the benefit of having a data first approach in the M&A space. So we had a customer who's divesting about half of their business, and after analyzing the half they're divesting, we said, hey, look, do you realize there's some shared components that you'll have to keep in your systems, and we'll have to pass across to the acquirer? And they nodded, knowingly and expecting that. And it was a bolt. This is a complex manufacturer, but it was a simple part. I then said to them, as a result of that common part, who's going to own the inventory? And literally the entire room looked at their shoes and they're like, you've now asking us a question that we should have considered before, but we haven't, right? And what you want to do is you want to find these, we want to find these early. So you've heard the cliche before where people say the devil is in the details. Well, based on the story that I just told you, you could see maybe more appropriate for the conversation we're having now is the devil is in the data.
Just to build on Leonard's point, very frequently there are compliance requirements that are not uncovered because of insufficient attention to looking at the data at a granular level. And that's one of the things that this empirical data-driven approach really excels at finding out and making sure that the compliance execution is also bulletproof. Having a good clean room environment is really important, and that means being able to merge data together from different companies in a secure environment and empirically do the analysis of the transaction based on that with the right compliance and security in place. That's a huge value accelerator.
So what's the benefit of engaging a company that only plays in the data space like Cinity, right? A lot of these deal makers, they're working on the buy and the sell side. They have previous relationships sometimes with a company that they're, one of their customers is divesting to, and it creates a conflict of interest. So when you're dealing with an exclusive data company like Cinity, that's a cloud native company, they can bring in data from all the related parties. They can act as a third-party fiduciary. They can help on deal evaluation and deal realization without a mountain of contracts.
Even with all the benefits of SAP, doing the execution of these deals correctly is very complex. One of the main stumbling points and failure points is not doing data correctly. A company like Cinity that's not only deep data experts, but has 25 plus years in doing some of the largest mergers, acquisitions, and divestitures globally of all time, it really is a great accelerator to making sure that the data lands correctly in the SAP environment, the data is clean, it's business useful, you can transact appropriately, and kind of move on with the execution of your integration program and your SAP transformation.
So we've talked quite a bit about deal evaluation and even deal realization on the other side of the transaction. Are you getting the return on investment that you hoped? And we talked only a little bit about where we started from, 18 years ago as Cinity, as integration, right? And as I like to say, it may only be 20% of the process, but if you don't do it well, it could be 100% of the problem, right? So you have to pick some common data model, some ERP system. A very common one today, especially for multinationals, is SAP as the backbone. And then you have to harmonize all of these onto this common data model. SAP and Cinity jointly together have sponsored a research project by IDC to say, hey, the customers that they've done this for in the past, are they getting a return on investment and how fast can that be achieved? And the numbers are staggering, some 300% return on investment, some 8-month payback period, millions of dollars saved. And I think actually worthwhile your effort just to explore the details of that as you look at your own transactions. So as we like to say, the data that's in your application today existed in your prior application and it will exist in your future application. It's the DNA of your business, right? That's really the reason or the catalyst, if you would, to take a data-first approach in your merger, acquisition, and divestiture transactions. And we've talked a little bit about where we think the best of breed people are going. Having learned from rougher transactions where someone wrote a transitional services agreement and it said, oh yeah, let the acquiring company have the data in the applications and no more details than that. And there's a mountain of work that needs to be done well to really get the return on investment. So my recommendation to you is join the best of breed, bring data early into your planning process and call us and see how you can leverage what we've done in the past to make you have a more effective transaction.
So I've been fortunate enough to work on a number of these deals in my career. They're absolutely fascinating. I always learn a lot from working on them. If I could leave you with one thought, having a data first mindset, having a data strategy is the critical ingredient in whether your deal is going to do well or not do well. something that I've had the chance to observe over and over again, and that we really value our ability to help our clients and bring to the marketplace that data first and data strategy methodology to make sure that the deals turn out well. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonard and Chris. To learn more, visit us at synity.com/mergers and acquisitions.